Well, as massive crude oil theft continues unabated in Nigeria, there are fears that the Naira is headed for the worst. While the depreciating Naira cannot be attributed solely to a lack in the supply of foreign exchange in spite of high oil prices, economists say certain policy misfires by authorities have worsened an already bad situation. Meanwhile, the Senate has resolved to summon the Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele, to educate and inform lawmakers on the reasons for the rapid depreciation of the Naira. As the Russia-Ukraine war continues to take the blame for the global economic crisis, who is to blame for Nigeria's fuel subsidies surpassing oil revenue and a rising debt profile, which also surpassed revenue?
Right, we have to discuss Nigeria's economic challenges and a way out. That's more important. We're joined by Johnson Chukwu, an economist and managing director at Cowry Assets. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. The basic question is, why is the Naira on a free fall? We hear that the National Assembly is going to be summoning the governor of the central bank to ask him questions. If you were in a position to ask the questions, what would you be asking the central bank governor, and what answers would you expect?
Thank you, Ngozi, for having me. If I were in a position to ask the central bank governors, I already know the answers. I already know the issues. So what I will focus on then is to ask him to prefer or to gauge his thoughts on how to address those issues. In the first place, we know that our foreign currency receipts is far below our foreign currency expenditure or payments. And that's the core of what will put pressure on the exchange rate of any country. So as we stand today, and like you said in your preamble, unfortunately, as a country that's an oil-producing country, ideally, we should be talking of exchange foreign currency strengthening, our exchange rate strengthening. We should be talking of our foreign currency reserve growing. We should be talking of lower inflation rate. But we are suffering the reverse. And this is very unfortunate because countries in our position, countries that are crude oil exporting countries, are actually smiling to the bank, celebrating, not really celebrating that people are being killed in Ukraine and Russia, but I mean, it's a windfall for them. So we know the problem, what the problem is. The key thing is that, do we have a solution to it? Are we going to live through this for the rest of our life as a country? What are we going to do to forestall or to reverse the current trend? And so if I were to ask the central bank governor, I wouldn't be asking what's the cause of the problem, because I know the cause of the problem. The fact that we're not in enough foreign exchange because we're not exporting enough crude. We're not producing enough crude to export. Because as it stands today, our major export commodity is crude oil. And crude oil prices are at the peak. We're seeing a crude oil trading above $100 per barrel. And unfortunately, we're not producing enough. And to worsen matters, we're also importing the refined products at, call it, heightened or elevated market prices. So we know the problem. But the question is that, what would the monetary authority, what else, or what other tool does the monetary authority have to fight this problem, given that their war chest has been depleted in terms of their foreign reserve?
Indeed, and that's what I want to ask you. When you talk about exchange rate strengthening, we've seen several interventions by the central bank to strengthen the Naira. We've banned sale to Forex to BDCs. We have a long list of items that, kind of access Forex. So what exactly should we be doing to strengthen the Naira?
Well, there are two ways, there are two approaches to managing your currency or strengthening your currency. One is the demand management, and also the second aspect, or the flip side of it, is supply management. What the central bank has been doing is demand management, where they are trying to force away or curtail some demand. But the question is that, what are we doing to manage the supply side of it, which is very critical, because I always say this. When we became independent, we had a population of about 45 million. Today, we have a population of about 406 million. For the estimate for this year is about 206 million. The estimate for this year about 218 million. And there is a minimum level of consumption that we must recognize, we must consume as a people, given the size of our population. So the issue is that demand management, will it be effective? You can't have a family of 10 and you say they will eat the food that 2 people will eat, a family of 2 will eat. So you must either starve them to death, or you must find a way to feed them. So demand management will not work effectively. The key thing to do is to focus on supply management. And supply management, you look at what are those supply sources. The core supply source for any country is export. And our export as it stands today, because we have not diversified export products, is crude oil. We're not producing enough crude. If you look at our May production of crude, it was only about 1.024 million barrels a day. And even the June figure, which they said has increased about 1.266 million barrels a day, is still shy of our open quarter of 1.826 million barrels for the month of August. So we need to improve production, and we'll come back to what we need to do to improve production. The other aspects or the other major sources of supply of foreign exchange are from what you call capital importation, which will include foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, and then you look at diaspora remittances. So how do you incentivize all these other components of foreign exchange earnings? So the key thing is, the focus will be, what is central bank doing to incentivize inflows from these multiple sources I mentioned: foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, diaspora remittances, and then the fiscal authorities have to tell us what they're doing to reduce or curtail the rate at which oil production is being stolen, oil that is produced is stolen, or oil is shortened because production is not taking place because the pipelines have been compromised. Those are the key things we should be looking at.
And of course, the IMF has also pointed out that Nigeria is not able to cash in on, the global oil crisis because, hey, the subsidy continues to scrape any revenue that Nigeria can even, expect. Should there be a red line in terms of a limit to how far the Naira can fall? Can the CBN put a limit?
CBN doesn't have the power to put a limit. Anybody who tells you there's a limit is basically talking about wishful thinking. You only say a limit if you say, look, I have a war chest, I have this capacity, I have this reserve, which I can use to intervene if the exchange rate goes to this level. If you don't have the war chest, you really don't have the capacity to put a limit, to define a limit or define your red line, as you call it. So the key thing is, what do we need to do? How do we react to the situation we find ourselves? Like I said, how do we incentivize the other three components of capital importation so as to reduce the pressure we are going through now because we're not exporting enough? And most importantly, which should be the primary focus of the government, what do we need to do to restore production to maybe 1.8 million barrels a day? Because we have the reserve, we have the pipelines, we have the oil companies, even those when the IOC have exited, so to local oil companies. So we still have the assets on the ground, but we're not producing it. What do we need to produce? How do we enter into some level of understanding in a win-win situation with the oil-bearing communities so that they will allow for production to take place? How do we arrest those who are criminally breaching the pipelines? Those are the issues we should be talking about, and those are the issues that are the feat of the government to do.
Okay, and one wonders if is the right time to have the conversation about removal of subsidy, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Johnson Chukwu, Managing Director of Cowry Assets Management and an economist, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the Nigerian economy.